So the next step is to take a look at main window implementation and just see what kind of updates we may need in this file. So I've made a list of things to do, and the first thing on my list is to update the list of radio button callbacks. So we have the line, we have the circle, we have the rectangle, but the new one is RDO text. So this is what I think we need. RDO text callback, right? And callback, so it's very similar callback. So we're just going to use the same callback. We're getting all of the calls in callback radio button. And this time the radio selector will capture radio ID text. Okay, so this is the callback for, let me just resize this so everything becomes visible here. So this RDO text callback goes to callback radio button, the same static function we've had in the main window before. But the selector now is using ID text, which of course is part of the new enumeration right here. So we have updated this in Dropbox header file, so that should be fine. The next thing, as I mentioned earlier, and this was the main reason why I did not want to run this application just yet, was that I would like to, first of all, we already telling Dropbox to use ID line as a primitive type internally. So now we're going to also set the input label. So remember, input label is the pointer to the input box that we added to capture the text. As soon as we are able to run the application, I will walk over this implementation one more time. But this is the update that I'm making right now. So next on my list is to basically check the thing is that well, first of all, the callback radio button really doesn't have to change at all, because we're retrieving the selector and we're calling generic selector function. Everything is working properly. What we need to revisit is this click radio button, which changes the type of the graphical primitive to use. And another function that has to be updated is this checkbox handler. That really needs to be updated. In fact, we can start right here. So I'm thinking that the new implementation may look like this. And let's do this. This is pretty much brand new code. I'm just going to replace what I had before here for debugging purposes with this new version. So let's talk about this. So this checkbox is now capable of changing the type of the graphical primitive to draw, just like other radio buttons. So if we click line or circle or rectangle, we instantly update the primitive type to use by the Dropbox. However, the checkbox, if we check it, should also be capable of making certain updates to switch over to circle field or rectangle field as necessary. So my first step is to obtain the Boolean is filled, basically going to the widget, getting its value and comparing with 0. So if it's not 0, then it's filled. And I'm displaying the result still on the console window for debugging and tracing purposes. The next thing is that I am going to the Dropbox, and Dropbox now provides this new member function inside the Dropbox class, right? So we'll resize this a little bit. So Dropbox has new member function which simply reports what is the current primitive type. So I'm getting this. And now, based on the field value, I would like to make sure that we can combine field with the current type and make sure that we select the appropriate primitive. So if this is text or line, we're going to ignore everything. So we switch on the current primitive type and we say if it's text or line, that's the selection, the radio button selection by the user, we're just going to ignore everything. If it's a circle and it's filled, right? So we say, okay, it's a circle. But if field is set, then we set primitive type to circle field. If it's already circle field and if the current setting and the field checkbox is not set, we flip it over to non-filled version of the circle. And same we do with the rectangle. We say, okay, user wants the rectangle, but the filled box is checked. So therefore, they want filled rectangle. If it's already rectangle filled, but it happens to be that they just click it and filled is not set, then they want the regular rectangle without being filled. And then, so at the end of these checks, all that's happening here is this primitive type gets modified as necessary, and then we tell Dropbox, now go ahead and use this updated primitive type. So the checkbox gadget is capable of updating the primitive type to be used by the Dropbox. So this is new code, and hopefully it just makes sense to do it like this. And now let's go to the original handler for radio buttons. And so what it does right now is just says whatever is the button ID should be the primitive type that the Dropbox should be using. So I think this needs some updating. So let's basically just assume, right? So let's do it this way. So I'm going to insert this code right here at the top. And so let's just assume that the primitive type that we should be using, right? So this primitive type is whatever the radio button ID is. But at the same time, if it's a circle, okay, if it's a circle, what we do quite appropriately already is that we're, if it's a circle, we say whatever the circle option is, we activate the checkbox, right? So we make it available for the user to interact with. But at the same time, we can say that in case if this check box value equals to 1, which means it's selected, the check mark is set, then the type should change to circle filled, right? So this is another situation where we have to combine this gadget with radio button and make sure that we pay attention to whatever the setting for the filled option is. So here we switch from ID circle, which is the button ID, to radio ID circle filled. Very similarly with rectangles, of course, with rectangles we can do the same exact option and just basically say, okay, if filled is set to 1, this is the value that it returns if the checkbox is set, then we switch from regular rectangle to rectangle filled. And then, of course, to be able to accommodate all of this, we're going to call this function right here, use primitive type, right? So we're just going to, at the end of this, just like we did with the checkbox, we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to say use primitive type of whatever primitive type we determined for you. And one more detail, just like we do it with the lines, I think what we can do is that we can just add another case for the text option, right? The text option does not use filled box, so whatever, if it's a text or a line, we can just deactivate the checkbox, and so the user realizes that it doesn't apply to these two options.